Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Fun with Fallen Flags. Today we're going to talk about the Rio Grande Southern. I know, I'm in a rut. We're definitely talking about some Colorado railroading, and since that's what I intend to model down the road, um, kind of you should be prepared for that at this point. I do have some other interests, definitely. I've got a lot of equipment from uh, the Pennsylvania Railroad. I also have interests in where I grew up in upstate New York, the Delaware and Hudson. I'd like to get into that at some point in the future. However, we're going to be talking about some more Colorado railroading. Um, you're just going to have to deal with it. I live in Denver, Colorado, so hey, that's what you're going to get. So let's talk about the Rio Grande Southern. Um, Now, I'm certainly no expert, and I certainly enjoy researching it. And there's a lot of material out there that I haven't even come across. There's some books out there that I would love to lay my hands on, but it's just they're kind of expensive, and I haven't really been able to put that together yet. So, with my limited knowledge, so anybody doesn't beat me up too badly, I just want everybody to know that I am going to qualify every episode with something like that to begin with, because this is a learning experience for me as well. So we're going to talk about the Rio Grande Southern. Oh, and so the first half of this episode is going to be about a little bit about the history, and then the second half is going to be about a modeling project. And I promise we're going to kind of keep that format. So over my shoulder, you'll notice that there's a trestle. This is based on a trestle that is at Ophir, Colorado. It is not an exact copy, so please don't hold me accountable for that. It was the first thing I did when I wanted to throw myself into narrow gauge Colorado railroading. I saw some photos, I did some reading, I did some research on it, and I said, well, I can overanalyze this thing all day long. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to jump in and start modeling. So I threw myself into that project. So let's talk about that on the second half. Let's go through the Rio Grande Southern a little bit. So from what I've read and from what I understand, the Rio Grande Southern existed on the extreme western side of Colorado. So the Durango, the Durango and Rio Grande Western was essentially a railroad that populated a lot of Colorado and did compete with some of the other railroads. However, the Rio Grande Southern had a unique role in it wasn't really a direct competition. It kind of was a um, offshoot of um, uh, the DNRGW. So to best explain it is that there was a path that went to the west side of Durango and Silverton, and as Durango, the railroad out of Durango was going up to Silverton, there's a couple of, I think, three small offshoot mining railroads, and they couldn't get all the way into Ouray because the canyon was way too steep. The Uncompahgre canyon that went down into Ouray, they it was just too steep. It was too rocky. They even talked about a cog railroad that didn't even happen. So instead, the Rio Grande Southern skirted around that and went to the west side and went through also some very steep areas, and went through and hit a bunch of mining areas. And then after it left Durango, it went up the west side. It came out at Ridgeway, and then it ran a little line down to Ouray. So it hit Ouray that way from the north. And then it basically hooked into the DNRGW from that side. So essentially, it was this single, sort of like a bridge route, but it essentially was this railroad that was didn't really see a ton of traffic. There wasn't like a bypass railroad where it was going to take all of the traffic through there because it was very rugged. Um, so anyway, the Rio Grande Southern was not a wealthy railroad, didn't have a lot of money. A lot of its equipment was used. Most of the cars and engines were picked up from other railroads like the Colorado and Southern. A lot of the equipment was either they picked up from railroads that were going out of business or equipment that was loaned to them. Everything was very heavily worn. They even had some equipment that they knew that they just couldn't replace, so they used essentially Denver and Rio Grande equipment ran over that railroad to pick up loads, and they just never tried to equip themselves with everything they would possibly need as a railroad. They really struggled towards the end, and they got the what you'll see is the Galloping Goose. They're the silver equipment. Anyway, we may do a topic on that because I know everybody who gets into the Rio Grande Southern has this obsession with the Galloping Goose, but essentially it looks like a box with a old automobile on the front, and it was used to do less than carload and mail routes over the railroad. So long story short, you know, there's a lot of romance associated with the railroad, but there's not necessarily a lot of money that came in, and they struggled to stay afloat for quite a long time. It was built over very, very rugged terrain, like we talked about. A lot of cuts into the mountains. It had, I think it was over 140 bridges. Some of them were trestles, some of them were Howe truss bridges. A lot of the bridges started out as one type and then became simplified or eliminated with just trestles. Some of even the Denver and Rio Grande Western did this. Some of the trestles would actually be filled in with rock fills. So the trestle would still be there, but it would be buried underneath the ground, and the grade would remain the same, but there would be just a lot of rock and gravel and etc. Buried in, and it would just basically be a fill, and it might be a curved trestle that was there, but it's not there anymore. Well, it's still there, it's just buried. So it looks like it was just, the trestle was just placed over the ground. So anyway, so a lot of the trestles did change over time. So as they changed over time, it means that they're, depending on what you're building, it's time sensitive. So you got to kind of be aware of that, especially if you're going to get really into the historical accuracy of the layout, and you can just build a layout and make sure it's makes you happy, and that's what it does. But the more research you do, the more historical accuracy you have, and that I find that is a very large part of the enjoyment of the hobby too. So as far as what you might want to do in that regard is there is a lot of information on the web for people that have already researched. If you just type in Rio Grande Southern trestles or Ophir or Ridgeway or any of the towns, you're going to pull up a lot of stuff. There's some people that have done absolutely amazing layouts and have researched all of this so that you can still do your research, but man, it's so much easier to follow somebody else as they're hacking through the jungle than just try to figure it all out and reinvent it all yourself. So take advantage of that. There's lots of books. There's a lot of kits out there that are duplications of, for example, the really old Campbell sand house that's built. Um, it's modeled after the sand house that's in Durango, and I think we talked about that in a previous episode. Um, the coaling tower that sits next to it, again, it's a kit. There's lots of other kits out there, laser kits. You don't have to necessarily cut everything with a brand new X-Acto knife. You can use some of the laser kits. There's some really good quality companies that are out there. So anyway, that is something that will definitely save you some time. But if you don't want to save yourself some time, you've got all the time in the world. You're unusual, but you may just enjoy doing the research. There's a Friends of Cumbrous and Toltec organization that I've actually started to throw myself into, and just making comments on photos and said, hey, this photo doesn't look like what you guys have it listed as. You know, that's kind of cool too, to actually, for me to be able to contribute something. I haven't done it very much, but I have noticed some places where they have questions about it, or it's vague. So, you know, throw yourself into it, see what you want to do. Any area of the country, there is organizations like that. So, you know, you definitely don't have to become obsessed with the thing that I'm focusing on, but, you know, some of this is what we do, is we just give back to the hobby, which is what I want to do. So in order for you to help yourself along as much as possible, starting up conversations, getting involved in other organizations, you know, forums, there's groups on Facebook, it's everywhere. All you got to do is look. So, and you found me, so, you know. Okay, so anyway, I'm beating a dead horse there. So let's move on. So the project, and I'll throw some screenshots up here in a while, but I want to give you an idea of kind of what my idea was. And you can see the almost finished project. This is a it's a trestle. It's based on the trestle that's at Ophir, Colorado, that was at Ophir. It doesn't have a little bit of a curve to the end of it on one side. There's some stuff that I haven't completed on it, but the basic structure is there. I can put track on it today, and I can run trains across it if I want to. So, but that's essentially what it looks like. It's 41 bents, and bents are the vertical legs. They're braced across the center as well. And I'll throw some photos up so you can see the construction process and that type of thing. It may not match the exact number of bents that are on the actual trestle. I'm sure they don't. I know the profile and the height, it isn't going to be an exact match. This one's actually pretty deep towards the center. And I used a couple different templates. I may be getting ahead of myself, but the original template that I used was actually just a piece of paper, and it had everything drawn out that I found online. I used super glue. That likes to soak right into paper really easily, so that didn't work out past the first bend. Then I made something out of plastic. It's not very deep. Doesn't have a lot of profile to it. Things slipped around a little bit. It was a good idea. That didn't stick around either. I decided I was going to make a big trestle. So I made a big template. So lots of room on here for more templates, but this is the one I actually used. After I finished that project, online I found that Black Bear Construction Company comes out with templates of their own. And they're not very big, but you can just extrapolate further down as you need to. So I haven't used this. I plan on using this, and I'll make something else, probably a small shallow trestle that I've seen, a bridge that I like that's down over kind of some flat land over by Chama. So the objectives for the trestle that we did was just to get our feet wet. That was essentially what we wanted to do. Kind of used 45 trestle 45A for that was right in Ophir. They actually, Rio Grande Southern numbered their trestles by kind of mile markers. So 45A was the first trestle at mile marker 45. And if there was a B, C, if there's a bunch of trestles within that mile, then they would just add letters to append to the end. So, but this is just to get our feet wet. I wasn't looking for, complete perfection. I just wanted something big. I wanted something impressive. I wanted something I could use on a layout. This one has 21 bents on it, and it's about 4 feet long. So when it's all done, it'll go on the layout. It may not go exactly where it's supposed to, but I know I'm going to use it. So, and there's a couple things left to do that we need to finish. There was a couple different construction methods that we tried, but I keep saying we. I did it, and I'm not more than one person. So anyway, I did it so that the legs went all the way down through instead of being stacked how they were actually constructed. There's lots of information out there on how to construct the trestle, but I wanted something that was going to be strong more than anything else. So my next version will probably be built differently. I wanted it also to be a little uneven so that the center of the trestle was maybe not exactly in the center. In the deepest spot, the bottom 2 feet are offset a little bit. You'll notice that the trestle has a whole bunch of stack over here of hard drives, and that's so that it can stand up because the bottom 2 feet aren't exactly uniform. So also, one side tapers off deeper than the other one is a little more shallow. So the center 2 aren't exactly necessarily the deepest 2. Let me think what else. That's about it for the goals. I wanted to use kind of the standard information that I found for trestles. So essentially all of it is built out of 12 by 12s, 12 inch by 12 inch scale lumber. The stringers that go between are slightly smaller, and then the main pieces are actually sandwiched together. There's a couple of, I think they're 12 by 14s that are sandwiched together as a pair, and those run the length of it. So they're actually, those pieces are the 4 foot length. And then there's some other dimensions too with some of the other lumber too. Some of the stuff that I did was it's essentially painted at this point. I did not stain it. I think next time I would try to stain it. That I think would maybe have a little bit better look, but I haven't tried weathering it or anything like that. I would probably also, instead of having the legs run all the way down, I would have them stop and build a single bent and then sandwich the next one up underneath it and then underneath it, which is actually how the wood would have looked. And then that would allow some of the cross bracing, when it hits it, would actually look a little bit better. Instead, they kind of looks funny. Anyway, you can see some of the photos here in a minute when I run those. I would probably test a couple different kinds of weathering on it too. I haven't got to that point. So it's not done. So what we have left to do is we have to add track on the top of it. I just have a piece of track sitting on top of it right now. And there according to the actual, a lot of times you'll see on bridges, you'll see guardrails that run down the center. You'll have the outside rails, and then you'll have guardrails that run down the center. So you'll see it looks like 4 rails. When you get to the end of the bridge, the center rails will actually kind of point together. It helps with keeping the engine and cars, if there's anything loose or running not on track, then it's going to help realign it before it gets on the bridge. This bridge didn't have that. So I was getting ready to add that, and I did some more research, and I went, hey, wait a minute, this bridge does not have those center rails. So I scrapped that plan completely. I'll use the rails that I bought for something else. I'll scratch build some switches or something. I've done that before in narrow gauge and scale. So I'll do that. It'll be a lot easier in HO. I can't find any information about the trestle, about how many of the little fire barrel locations there were on it. I think there's about 3. I saw some at a couple different locations. I saw it about I think location number 6, trestle bent number 6, and then number 16, I think it was. So I don't know what the spacing is, but I'm going to try to get that pretty close. Again, it's not exact with the trestle that was Ophir, so a lot of this is just education for me as I research myself into how this was constructed. But I think it was location trestle number 6, number 12, and then after that I don't have any photos. On the edge of the trestle, the pieces that stick out, on where they stick out from the decking, there was a little 22 gauge piece of metal that would cover the top of that, and it was flashing, kind of like what flashing goes from your shingles up into your house. It was kind of the same type of thing. And it covered that top of that trestle so that it protected the entire bridge from any type of fire or anything like that. So that bent, I should say, actually has 2 little pieces of metal material, and if there were, cinders or whatever, any type of issues that they would have, that would be covered, so there would be less. And I haven't really decided exactly how I'm going to do that. I might use some sort of material. I've seen one person had used kind of a tape, and they had glued it on, so I'm not sure how well that's going to fit, but I'm going to find some sort of material. I have some old metallic looking paper that came out of one of the kits that I had bought a long time ago, and there's a lot of it left over, so I might try that. Either way, I'm going to weather it. It's going to be galvanized metal, so it's going to be something that needs to be, very well silvered and oxidized and everything else. So anyway, moving on. The other than adding track, obviously, and the barrels and the flashing, I found by kind of a fluke, the Rio Grande Southern had, as the engine was coming up to the trestle, there's a little tiny sign that just lists what bridge it is, and I have a picture of something that says 45A as it's coming up to this trestle. So it's not very big. I would say in actual size the sign was probably maybe 12 by 18 inches, and it just said 45A, and that's all that's on it. I don't know what color it is. I assume it's maybe black. But again, this is black and white photo, so I can't really tell. So I'm going to put that on each end. But again, if I don't decide to put this trestle as number 45A, then I have to decide what sign I would actually use. So those are the steps to complete. So that's the modeling half of this week, Fun with Fallen Flags. I don't know what we'll do next week. I want to continue to explore new topics. I'll add something in the blog when this gets completed so you can look at any of the updated photos. But other than that, I want to thank everybody for logging in, checking this out. Let me know what you guys think. I know you can go to the webpage after you're done and like it or did not like it or whatever. So thumbs up, thumbs down. Let me know how I'm doing. Let me know if you're interested in this at all, and if you want me to explore a different topic, please let me know. That's it for this week. I'm going to follow up at the end here with the actual photos from the construction of the bridge, each of the steps, some of the things that I learned, some of the things that went well. Other than that, thanks for watching and thanks for checking out the trestle. There's a close-up. It's very lightweight too. All right. Thanks everybody. See you guys next week.